Alright, today I'm reviewing the Solar A1.7 7-string guitar. Now this is a re-review. I did review this guitar when I first got it, but I've had it for almost a year now, so I want to tell you how it's held up. Before I jump in, I have to say I'm not sponsored by any of the brands shown here. I'm also not a guitar virtuoso. I'm not in any amazing touring bands or anything. I do the casual music online thing. I make YouTube videos. I put my music on streaming services like Spotify, YouTube Music, Apple Music, iTunes, all that stuff. So let's jump right in. How has this guitar held up? So I do have to say that since getting it and initially setting it up, I have had to set it up one more time, which isn't so bad. Usually my guitars, I do have to set them up once or twice a year. So that's pretty much par for the course. And so that was about 7-ish months ago, and I haven't had to set it up again since. It's been rock solid. This is my 7-string with the lowest action actually. And the action has stayed low too, which is very important. Whenever I'm recording after a day's work, I do have a day job. My fingers are pretty tired. My hands are tired. You know, I'm getting on in the years, so I do have some inflammation here and there, you know. It happens. So it's really nice that the action has stayed pretty low. It's stayed super playable. It's sounding better and better than ever. It's aging pretty well. And the tuning is rock solid too. Of course, it does have the locking tuners you can see, but also it does have the Evertune bridge, which has been really useful. I've used this guitar here and there, especially on my cover of the Upper Brinstar theme, which is on streaming services, so check it out if you want. But I find somehow I get the best rhythm tone with this guitar here. It just has the stock Solar Duncan pickups. It just really helps that it stays in tune. I can also report that none of the components have broken. There's been no weird wiring issues with the pickups. The switch still works like it did the first day. The potentiometers haven't come loose at all. The output jack is still in place. Everything is still working fine, so that's really nice. Now let's get into the playing feel. How does it feel to play this guitar? So this guitar is smooth and extremely comfortable. The satin finish on this, it's also on the neck, and it does feel pretty good. It has a nice quick feeling to it. Maybe over time it's gonna gloss over and get slower, but that hasn't happened yet. The neck itself feels pretty good. I'd say it's kind of a thin C, not super thin. It does have a little bit of chunk to it, but not too much chunk at all. It is still on the thinner side, and so it's extremely comfortable. I can play it all day. It's thin enough that you can get your shred in. It's thick enough that you could do your riffs and chords, and that it won't fatigue your hand too. And most importantly, the neck feels like it was made for a 7-string. When playing the 7 strings of some other brands, it can feel like they took a 6-string neck and just stretched it out so the middle is gonna be all flat or whatever. And I guess some people like that, but me personally, I like the more, I guess, natural feeling neck, like the C shape. I am an Ibanez fan, as you can see. So I do like thinner necks, but only if they've got that nice, comfortable neck profile to that. And so this has that. Fretting the notes too also feels really satisfying. And it might be a combination of the stainless steel frets, the ebony fretboard, and the extended scale length. This is a 26.5-inch scale length. So all those factors do come together, and it is pretty nice. The scale length itself, even though it's longer than the typical 25.5 inches of a regular Super Strat, it feels perfect for the body, for the playing position. Overall, it doesn't feel like it's too long. It doesn't feel like you're doing any extreme stretches. 6 strings for me are always going to feel like home, so I always will prefer that 25.5-inch scale length, but picking this up is a good compromise. I do have to say this does feel a bit heavy. The alder solars I have are a bit on the heavier side, especially the 7 strings. So if you're looking for a lightweight instrument, then this might not be it. But it's not extremely heavy. I could play a set with this. Alright, now let's talk about how this guitar sounds. So these pickups, I'd say their output is more on the medium side and pretty balanced. And it really feels like, of course they were made for metal, but you can do a lot of different styles with them. They feel like a canvas that you can apply your amp settings or your preset settings to. As I've mentioned earlier, I do have the best rhythm tone, at least in my opinion. You know, tone is subjective. But I do have the best rhythm tone for a 7-string out of this particular guitar. I do have a Solar T1.7, and I have it with the Fishman Moderns. And that does sound pretty good too. But something about these, it just sounds perfect. And it's always funny because when I track the rhythms in isolation, it sounds okay. But when everything comes together, all the layers are in, all the mixing's done, those rhythm tracks then sound the best. And of course, this can do leads too. I find because of the somewhat longer scale length, it's not a super long baritone scale length. It's not short scale, obviously, but you can do leads on it, and it does sound good. Especially if you're playing up top, up here, the little extra distance is actually pretty nice. Their fingers aren't squished together if you have bigger hands. And of course, the tone will always sound best when you're in tune. So the power chords or whatever chords you're doing under distortion, clean, whatever, it's always going to sound great when you're in tune. So the Evertune has been pretty helpful with that, and it does pretty much work as advertised. The pickups themselves could be, I guess, a bit hotter, slightly more articulate, but they're not bad by any means. That's just splitting hairs or picking at little details for the sake of this conversation. They're much better than, say, Ibanez stock pickups, for example. And of course, even if the pickups were that, 5% better, it wouldn't matter as much, if at all. The average listener wouldn't be able to tell. What they would be able to tell is if you were out of tune or in tune. So staying in tune boosts the tone, I'd have to say, really well. Of course, the budget wiring, and I don't think this is perfectly shielded. You do get some EM noise, you do get some buzz under heavy gain. I'm in an apartment complex, so there's all kinds of people shooting out all kinds of signals with their Wi-Fi's, etc. So if you're recording under those situations like I do, you got to make sure you have a good noise gate. It isn't as bad as single coil hum though, don't get me wrong. So would I recommend this guitar? Well, you could probably figure out from what I was saying, but I do like this guitar. So if you're looking for a 7-string that has a perfect neck profile, in my opinion, and you like the more modern specs, the ebony fretboard, the stainless steel frets, the satin neck, and of course the Evertune, then I would say go for it. The pickups do sound good. I mentioned they could be slightly more articulate, but they're by no means muddy whatsoever. Like I did have an RGD, for example, an Ibanez RGD, and the Fusion Edge 7s, they were really mushy on the 7th string, but these aren't. These are purpose built. As I've mentioned, the Evertune is pretty good. It does still work like it did day one. The Evertune isn't magic, it's a mechanical system, so you do have to tune it eventually over time. But for 1 or 2 day recording sessions, it does stay in tune. It's extremely useful. You don't get pulled out of the moment between takes to have to retune or anything like that. Intonating it is pretty nice too. Overall, I'd say it's the perfect workhorse 7-string, especially if you're into the 2 pickups, the metal thing. It's really good for that. You could do rock, other stuff on it too. And it's also a lot of fun to play. So if you have a good noise gate and good amp settings or plug-in settings, then this will fit right in with the rest of your guitars. It will work great for recording like I do. It will also be really good for playing live too. If you're going, say, from a warm green room to a cold stage, or you're transporting your guitar, you have to drive somewhere, and the humidity, the temperature is completely different, this will stay in tune, and you won't have to worry about any embarrassing out of tune moments. Of course, the neck still is made of wood, so you do have to account for that. But the neck is thick enough that it won't react too much to any temperature changes. I do have to say I don't live where it snows or anything like that, so I can't speak to taking it outside into the snow and playing it. But from the temperature swings here, it's held up pretty nice. So this will work for recording, for performing, and you could have a full music career with this. This could be your 7-string. So I do recommend it. Of course, it is a bit on the heavy side, so if you're looking for something lighter, maybe look for something else. But yeah, that's the update on this guitar, the Solar A1.7. Did I answer all your questions? Do you have any other thoughts, comments? Leave them down in the comment section below. You know this is YouTube. I have to say the YouTube things. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share the video, print out every frame and mail it, give it to everyone you know. And as always, peace.